Network maintenance and methodologies, let's begin. So some of the key network maintenance components and some of the things we'll have to be doing to maintain our infrastructure, okay, is things like, and roles, and these may be roles, processes, and we're going to talk about each of these, right? But some of the key things we'll be doing is capacity planning. We should know what network requirements we need before the need arises to have them, right? So we should be prepared and understand room for growth, okay? And just business growth in general. Device installation, okay? Adds, moves, and changes, or Macs. A lot of times this is written as Mac work, right? And it's not like, oh yeah, I understand, Apple, Macintosh computers. It's not that whatsoever. It's just Mac stands for moves, adds, and changes. So if you ever see that written, that's read the context of how it's written, because that's a lot of people say, yeah, I'm doing Mac work right now, or whatever it is. So, all right. Also responding to incidents when they occur, performance tuning, making sure your network and infrastructure is optimized to meet your particular needs and your particular environment, right? Also disaster recovery planning. That's a big part of infrastructure and the life cycle of an architecture. Planning for worst case scenarios, right? And we're going to talk about the different things to plan for a disaster, right? Because these could be natural disasters, they could be made accidental disasters, any of those kind of things. A lot of things are included in disaster recovery nowadays. And so we'll talk about the pluses and drawbacks for those and how to prepare for those. Also, security audits. If you're in a particular type of vertical like healthcare, right, or medical or legal or any of those industries, there is published guidelines that you have to follow for that electronic information, right? So we're going to talk about doing security audits and best practices there, and also just standard backups. So we'll be talking about all of these in detail. All right, so whenever it comes to network maintenance, which approach do you employ? There's a concept called interrupt driven. And what that is basically you're a troubleshooter. So whenever something happens, you go and you fix it. And you're like, I can fix anything. Just put me behind it. I can fix it. And believe me, I've spent a couple years doing that myself. Whenever I first got started in IT, whenever I would do deployments, I would follow the statement of work and the design documents and all that kind of stuff. Definitely I would follow those during the deployments. But then whenever somebody's like, hey, I've got an issue, I would go in and I want to think that even in the early days, because of the people I worked around at the time being such good engineers and leaders, I think that I had kind of a hybrid approach where they were like, you at least need to get a Visio, you at least need to understand the overall architecture before you just jump in. So pretty early on I learned that. But a lot of people just think whenever an issue happens, I'm just going to run over and solve it, right? I'm a problem solver. And so that's great. You could be the best problem solver in the world, but when it comes to enterprise networks, I'm going to try to make the strongest business case I can to you to get you to understand to use a structured approach. And whenever you're working with Cisco and the exam, all that kind of stuff, it's going to say the best way is to, have a structured approach. Because if you're just jumping in to fix things, typically that means you're kind of, I'm going to jump in and fix it and then I'm done. Okay, everything's good here, I'm done for the day. Well, what about documenting what you did and documenting what was there whenever you solved it and putting a process in place to ensure that that doesn't happen again? How does that help out anybody else in the organization? You did fix the issue, you did solve maybe, whatever problem it was, maybe a department was down and you brought them back up. You're the hero. However, how does that help any of your colleagues or teammates or the organization to understand what happened in the first place and how can we evolve to make sure it doesn't happen again? And that's by using the option B here, which is structured approach. And that means constant network baselining, you planning, and also ongoing maintenance. So structured approach, being methodical. And there's a lot of frameworks out there that will help us with this, okay? So some of the benefits of a structured approach is you get predictable network behavior. You get less cost, and there's so much information that backs that up. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to be spending a lot more time if I have to get all these documents and follow all these procedures before I have to go and just, replace a GBIC, right? Or whatever the case is. But in reality, it's going to cost less. Why? Because you're going to have less downtime. And it's not just going to be the sole soldier anymore that can fix everything. If everybody is properly equipped and trained in the technology and in the infrastructure and everything, you're going to be doing preventative maintenance, by default. And so, again, I'm going to be pushing the structured approach. You get job security, more reliable and secure networks, because structured approach means you're always going to be doing something, right? You may say, well, our network doesn't go down. It doesn't have any issues. But, eventually it will, and eventually you'll have to do something. It actually looks much better to constantly be working towards it and ensuring that all the updates are done and all the patches are done and putting new processes and policies in place. Basically, if you're in that position where you're the engineering lead or a senior engineering architect for a company, you should be growing the IT department as a business just like the rest of the business. And you should be evolving with them. And you should be bringing things to the table saying, hey, I've noticed that, accounting said they were only going to grow 15% this year, but really, we've used 3 times that amount of equipment and 3 times the amount of man hours there. So let's put a plan in place to really accommodate, 40% growth instead of the 15% that they put in the plan. Just things like that. So you're going to be more ingrained in the business process than just, I know the routers, I know the switches. If it's anything else, I'm not a part of it, that kind of thing. So anyway. And then the maintenance models I was talking about that will help you through all of this life cycle technologies is ITIL. And that offers, and that's the IT infrastructure library. It's best practices for IT service management. Then we also have something called FCAPS. And FCAP stands for Fault, Configuration, Accounting, Performance, and Security. And so it was developed by the ISO, the International Standards Organization. And so that's an available blueprint basically for technology lifecycle, right? Then we also have the Telecommunications Management Network, TMN, and that was developed by the ITU, derivative of the FCAPS model for telecommunications, right? And then we have the PPD-IOO model. And this stands for Prepare, Plan, Design, Implement, Operate, and Optimize. And this is also called the Cisco Lifecycle Framework. So I know a lot of details about the PPD-IOO because I have been doing design stuff and architecture for a while. And also, through the CCDP program, which, by the way, once you complete the CCNP, to get a CCDP is just one exam, so you might consider it. Anyway, this lifecycle framework, Cisco got together and said, what are all the things that we need to do to ensure that a given technology or architecture reaches its potential for the customer and is deployed without any issues and also maintained and optimized without any issues, and then have a plan to refresh that whenever needed, right? And do this in a seamless fashion where customers would get the most benefit from a given technology or product. And they sat down and they developed this. And it is a 6-stage life cycle approach. So prepare, plan, design, and I said this in the switch class I did. Look at how many steps go into the life cycle before you even get to implement. A lot of people are like, yeah, let's order, switches and routers and yada, yada, I'm going to throw them in. But look at how many steps are actually involved. You've got 3 steps that go first before you get to install anything. And that's a good sign of a structured approach because you're planning the architecture appropriately. You're you're preparing for this type of solution. You've got all the documentation needed. It's, you're working with your colleagues. We're going to talk about this model a lot. And Cisco actually has job roles assigned to each phase of this to, basically say if you want to utilize this architecture, there's certain positions that need to be filled to reach this architecture. So, for example, the prepare and plan, these are usually project managers. So these are PMs. And you might also have a sales person there. So you might have like a CSE or a Cisco sales expert. Then for design, guess who we bring? That's your DA, DP, so design associate, design professional, and DE, design expert. For implement, guess who they bring to the table for implement? For implement, you're going to have your NPs, right? Your NAs, your NPs, depending on the type of architecture and product and all that stuff. You'll have your NP and your IEs. Okay? And then operate and optimize. You've got usually the customer employees that's going to be taking care of the operate, and it's a collaborative effort. So it's not like you're like, okay, the PM takes care of the prepare plan, they hand it off to the design engineer designs it, they hand it off to the install engineer installs it, they hand it off to the customer. Okay, it is a collaborative effort between partner and customer, and this life cycle can be used for any particular type of organization. I mean, it fits everywhere. And that's the point, really all of these. And so a business really just needs to make the decision to adopt a methodology and a process or architect their own based off a blueprint, such as these models for their particular organization. And I'm going to talk about this and more coming right up.